The deep silence of space was broken only by the low, rhythmic hum of the USV Aegis. It was a lonely sound, the heartbeat of a ship that was drifting far from home. The stars outside the thick, reinforced windows were distant and cold. They did not offer comfort, only the harsh reality of the void. Inside the ship, the air smelled recycled and stale, a constant reminder of how far they were from Earth. Captain J sat in his command chair. The leather was worn, molded to his shape over the long months of the mission. He did not move. His eyes were fixed on the main screen that dominated the bridge. It showed a starfield that looked empty to the untrained eye, but Jay knew better. He knew they were being hunted. "They are still out there," Lieutenant Noah said from the tactical station. Noah's fingers danced across his console, tapping commands that were becoming useless. His voice was tight, strained by days of fear. "They are not just out there, Noah," Jay said quietly. "They are waiting." Waiting was exactly what the enemy was doing. For 3 days, the USV Aegis had been running. It was a fast ship, built for exploration, not for war. But it was not fast enough to outrun the Xylophian Empire. The Xylophians were an old race, vast and powerful. They controlled hundreds of star systems, and they did not like intruders. To them, humanity was a strange new species that was cluttering up the galaxy. They called us vermin. They said we were dirty, chaotic, and unworthy of the stars. The ship shook slightly. It was a faint tremor, just a ghost of a vibration in the metal floor, but everyone on the bridge felt it. "Shields are holding at 20%, Noah reported. "But the engines are overheating, Captain. We cannot keep running at this speed. If we push them any harder, they will just stop." Jay nodded slowly. He knew the numbers as well as Noah did. The Aegis was dying. It had been a glorious ship when it left Earth, full of hope and scientific equipment. Now it was a tired beast limping through the dark. Suddenly the main screen flickered. A face appeared. It was not a human face. The Xylophian commander had skin the color of pale ash and eyes that were too large, too black. There was no nose, only 2 small slits and a thin, lipless mouth that seemed to sneer. "Human vessel," the voice crackled through the speakers. It was a harsh sound like metal grinding on stone. "Your flight is pathetic. You scurry like a frightened insect." Jay stood up. He straightened his uniform, though it was wrinkled from lack of sleep. "This is Captain J of the United Space Vessel Aegis. We are on a peaceful mission. We have entered your territory by mistake. We ask only to leave." The alien creature on the screen made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Mistake? There are no mistakes in the void, only weakness. You are weak. Your ship is inferior. Your biology is fragile. You have surrounded yourself. Look at your sensors." Jay looked down at Noah. Noah's face had gone pale, the blood draining from his cheeks. He tapped a button, and the main screen changed the image. Jay felt his breath catch in his throat. They were surrounded. Coming out of the darkness behind the planets and the moons were Xylophian ships. There were hundreds of them. They were sleek and silver, shaped like daggers ready to stab the heart of the galaxy. Their engines glowed with a blue light that looked cold and dangerous. "We have you in a containment field," the commander said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You cannot run. Your weapons are primitive rocks compared to our technology. We have scanned your ship. You are low on fuel. Your shields are failing. You have no ammunition left for your little pop guns." It was true. The Aegis had fired its last defensive missiles hours ago, just to break through a blockade. Now they were defenseless. The bridge was silent. The crew of 10 humans sat frozen, looking at the screen. They knew what the Xylophians did to defeated enemies. They did not take prisoners. They enslaved them, worked them until they died, or they simply erased them. To the Xylophians, humans were not people. They were pests. "I offer you one chance," the commander continued. "Surrender? Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you do this, my soldiers will be quick. You will serve the Empire. If you resist, you will suffer before you die. You have 5 minutes." The screen went black. returning to the view of the silver fleet that trapped them. The silence on the bridge was heavy. It was the silence of hope vanishing. A young officer named Mena looked up from her science station. She was usually the most optimistic person on the ship, always finding something interesting in a nebula or a new star. But now, her eyes were wide with terror. "Captain," she whispered, "what do we do? They are right. We have nothing left. We can't even scratch their paint." Jay looked at his crew. He saw Noah gripping the edge of his console so hard his knuckles were white. He saw the navigator David with his head in his hands. He saw Mena trembling. They were scared. They were just kids, really. They were explorers, not soldiers. They had signed up to see the universe, to chart new worlds, not to fight a war they couldn't win. Jay walked over to the large window that looked out into space. He pressed his hand against the cold glass. He thought of Earth. He thought of the blue oceans and the green forests. He thought of the noisy, chaotic, messy cities. The Xylophians called it dirty. They called humanity vermin. But they didn't understand. They didn't understand that humanity didn't just survive. "We fought, Captain," Noah said, his voice cracking. "The 5 minutes are almost up. We have to send the surrender code. If we don't, they will fire." Jay turned around. He looked at the terrified faces of his crew. He felt a strange calm settle over him. It was the calm of a man who has accepted his fate but refuses to let that fate be dictated by a monster. "Mena," Jay said, his voice steady. "Come here." Mena stood up and walked to him, shaking slightly. "Yes, Captain?" "You have been working on that project," Jay said. "The one in the cargo bay. The experimental engine drive?" Mena's eyes widened even more. "The resonance cascade? But Captain, that's just theoretical." "It's not ready. It was supposed to help us stabilize star cores for terraforming. It's not a weapon." "I know," Jay said. "But is it charged?" "Yes," Mena said slowly. "It draws power directly from the main reactor. It's fully charged. But using it at full power, I don't know what will happen. It might tear the ship apart. It might do nothing. Or," Jay said, looking her in the eye, "it might be the only card we have left to play." The ship shook again, harder this time. Alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed on the consoles. "Captain!" Noah shouted. "They are charging their main weapons. They are locking onto us. They are going to fire." "Open a channel," Jay ordered. "Channel open, Captain." The face of the Xylophian commander returned. "Your time is up, insect. Do you surrender?" Jay looked at the alien. He saw the arrogance, the hate, and the certainty of victory. The commander thought he had already won. He thought he was just crushing a bug under his boot. "We have a saying on Earth," Jay said. His voice was not loud, but it was clear. He spoke slowly, making sure every word was understood. "We say that you should never corner a wounded animal." The commander frowned. "What is the meaning of this nonsense?" "Send the code." "No," Jay said. The bridge crew gasped. "No?" The commander hissed. "You choose death?" "I am not sending the code," Jay said. He turned his back on the screen and looked at Mena. "Lieutenant Mena, activate the cascade. Divert all power to the emitters. Maximum output." "Captain?" Mena stammered. "But the simulations?" "Forget the simulations," Jay commanded. Do it now." Mena hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Then she saw the look in Jay's eyes. It was a look of absolute resolve. She nodded and ran back to her station. Her fingers flew across the keys, typing in the override commands. "Acknowledged," Mena said, her voice gaining strength. "Diverting power. The resonance cascade is spinning up. Reactor output at 100%. 110%. On the screen, the Xylophian commander looked confused. "What are you doing?" "Your energy readings are spiking." "What is that signal?" "You wanted to see what humanity can do?" Jay said to the screen. "Look closely." The USV Aegis began to vibrate. It was a different feeling than the engine hum or the weapon impacts. It was a deep, bone-shaking resonance that seemed to come from the atoms of the ship itself. Fire! Destroy them! The commander screamed on the screen. Lieutenant Noah, Jay said, sitting back down in his chair. He strapped himself in. Brace for impact. The Xylophian ships fired. Bright beams of blue energy shot forward, crossing the distance between the fleets in seconds. They were aimed directly at the Aegis. It was the end, but just as the beams were about to hit, Mina slammed her hand down on the final key. Cascade active, she yelled. A pulse, invisible and silent, erupted from the human ship. It moved faster than light, passing through the incoming Xylophian weapons fire. The blue beams distorted and fizzled out, dissolving into harmless sparks of light. Jay watched the screen. He didn't blink. The Xylophians believed they were hunting a rabbit. They didn't know they had just woken a dragon. "Let's see how you handle this," Jay whispered. The first part was over. The trap had been set, not by the aliens, but by the humans who refused to bow. The Aegis stood alone against the Armada, but it was no longer running. It was fighting back with a weapon the galaxy had never seen: the silence that followed the activation of the resonance. Cascade was the loudest sound Captain Jay had ever heard. It was not a silence of emptiness, but a silence of suspense, the heavy pause before a storm breaks. On the main screen, the blue beams of energy from the Xylophian Armada had simply vanished. One moment they were burning through the darkness, aimed at the heart of the USV Aegis. The next moment they were gone, dissolved into harmless sparks that drifted away like dying fireflies. Jay watched the viewscreen closely. He could see the Xylophian ships out there, hundreds of silver daggers floating in the void. For a second they did not move. They were as still as statues, their powerful engines idling. "Report," Jay said, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "Energy spike has subsided," Noah said, sounding breathless. "But I don't understand." "Their weapons fired. We should be debris right now. Our shields were barely holding at 20%. That blast should have vaporized us." Mena was typing furiously at her station, her eyes scanning lines of data that scrolled faster than the human eye could follow. "The cascade didn't block the shot, Noah. It didn't stop the energy. It changed the frequency of the space between us. The beam passed through us, but because of the resonance shift, it couldn't interact with our hull. It passed through our ship like we were ghosts." Jay nodded. It was a theory that seemed impossible, but the proof was floating in the vacuum around them. They were alive. The face of the Xylophian commander appeared on the screen again. His pale, ash-colored skin looked even paler, if that were possible. His large black eyes were no longer filled with arrogance. Now they were filled with confusion. "What trickery is this?" the commander hissed. "Your primitive ship could not possibly deflect our weaponry." "Fire again. All batteries, concentrate fire on the human vessel." "No, wait," Jay whispered to himself. He knew how this would go. He had watched Mena's tests in the lab for months. He understood the basic principle of what she had built. Even if he didn't understand the complex math on the tactical map, Noah flinched as red icons lit up again. "They are charging their main cannons again. All ships are locking on." "Captain, the cascade can't hold against that much power. If they all fire at once, the resonance field will collapse." "Let them charge?" Jay said calmly. He walked over to Mena's station. "Mina, is the emitter stable?" "It is stable," Mena said, looking up from her screens. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. "But I have to widen the field, Captain. Right now the cascade is just protecting us. If we want to survive what comes next, if we want to stop them, we have to push the energy out." "Do it," Jay ordered. "Widen the field. Target the entire fleet formation." Mina hesitated. "Captain, the cascade was designed to stabilize planetary cores. It uses harmonic frequencies to bind matter together. If I reverse the polarity and push it out at this magnitude, it won't stabilize them. It will find the natural frequency of their ships and their bodies and shake them apart. It's a weapon of mass destruction." "They came here to erase us, Mina," Jay said softly. "They called us vermin." They gave us no choice. Widen the field. Mina looked back at her screen. She thought of the Xylophians, an empire that enslaved and destroyed worlds without pity. She thought of the crew of the Aegis, her friends and her family back on Earth. She made her choice. Her fingers danced across the console, inputting a new sequence, targeting all enemy signatures within 100,000 kilometers. Resonance output increasing to maximum. Field widening now. Outside the ship, something strange began to happen. It was not visible to the naked eye, but the sensors on the Aegis picked it up immediately. A wave of distortion, like heat rising from a road on a hot summer day, rippled out from the human ship. It moved silently, passing through the vacuum, ignoring the empty space but seeking out matter. On the bridge of the lead Xylophian ship, the alarm sirens were screaming. The commander was shouting orders, but his crew was not responding. They were clawing at their ears. "Report?" the commander roared. "Why aren't we firing?" The helmsman tried to speak, but he could only make a gurgling sound. He felt a vibration in his teeth and his bones, deep in his blood. It was a high-pitched whine that was not a sound but a feeling. It was as if every atom in his body was vibrating, trying to break free from the others. The commander felt it too. He looked at his hands. They were blurring. He tried to grip the armrest of his chair, but his fingers felt like jelly. What is happening? He thought, panic rising in his chest like a black tide. He looked out the viewport at the human ship. It looked so small, so pathetic. Yet, it was the source of this invisible torture. Back on the Aegis, the crew watched the tactical display with a mix of horror and awe. The red dots representing the enemy ships were not moving. "Are they firing?" Jay asked. "No," Noah said, his voice hushed. They are drifting. Their engine output is dropping to 0. Are they retreating?" "I don't think so," Mina said. She looked pale. "I am reading massive biosign disruptions. The resonance is affecting them physically. Their bodies are not designed to handle this frequency. Their ships are not designed to handle it." Jay looked at the main screen. The camera zoomed in on the nearest Xylophian cruiser. It was a massive ship, 3 times the size of the Aegis. But as they watched, the sleek silver hull began to shimmer. It looked like a reflection in a disturbed pond. The sharp lines of the ship began to wobble. "They are dissolving," Noah whispered. "Captain, the hull, it's turning to dust." It was a slow and terrifying process. There was no explosion. No fire, no mushroom clouds. The resonance cascade was simply unmaking the enemy ships. It was finding the atomic bonds that held the metal together and shattering them. The ships were disintegrating into a fine mist, drifting away into the darkness. On the Xylophian bridge, the commander realized he was dying. He tried to stand, but his legs would not hold him. He looked down and saw that his boots were crumbling into gray powder. He looked at his helmsman. The young Xylophian officer was falling apart before his eyes, turning into a cloud of ash, his expression of terror frozen on a face that no longer existed. The commander opened his mouth to scream, but his jawbone turned to sand. The darkness took him, not the darkness of space, but the emptiness of non-existence. "They believed the human ship would surrender," Jay said, watching the destruction unfold. He felt no joy, only a cold necessity. "They believed we were weak because we didn't have thousands of ships. They didn't know that sometimes one stone is enough to shatter a glass house." "Captain," Mina's voice broke through his thoughts. "The cascade is peaking. If we sustain this for much longer, the feedback loop will blow our own reactor. We have to stop." Jay watched the screen. The once proud armada was now a cloud of glittering dust. There were no more ships. There were no more threats. The silence of space had returned, but it was a different silence now. It was the silence of a graveyard. "Cut the power," Jay ordered. "Shut it down." Mina hit the keys and the vibration on the bridge stopped instantly. The humming in the air vanished. The crew slumped in their seats, exhausted by the adrenaline and the invisible pressure. On the main screen, the view was beautiful in a tragic way. Where the enemy fleet had been, there was now a vast, shimmering nebula of particles. The starlight shone through the dust, creating rainbows of color against the dark backdrop of the universe. It was the most beautiful graveyard in history. Noah sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. "We did it," he said, unable to comprehend the scale of what had just happened. "We destroyed them. All of them." "Not destroyed," Jay corrected, looking at the swirling dust. "Erased." The captain unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up slowly, his joints stiff. He walked to the front of the bridge and looked out the window at the empty space. The USV Aegis was alone again. But this time they were not alone because they were hiding. They were alone because they were the only ones left. He knew that the galaxy would change today. The Xylophians were a powerful empire, but humanity had just shown them something they had never seen before. They had shown them that humans were not afraid to break the rules of war to survive. They had shown them that the vermin could bite. "Mina," Jay said without turning around. "I want a full diagnostic of the ship. I need to know if the engine can take us back to Earth." "Yes, Captain," Mina replied, her voice filled with renewed confidence. "And Noah," Jay continued, "check the long-range sensors. Make sure there are no other ships nearby. We don't want any witnesses." Noah nodded and began to work. The fear that had paralyzed him earlier was gone. In its place was a grim determination. They had faced death, and they had mastered it. The Aegis began to turn slowly, its engines rumbling softly as it prepared to leave the field of dust behind. The stars ahead of them seemed different now. They were not just distant points of light. They were destinations. Humanity had taken a step today, a giant, bloody step into the darkness. They had proven that they would not go quietly into the night. They would scream, and they would fight, and if necessary, they would erase their enemies from the universe entirely. The trap had been sprung, and the hunter had become the hunted. The USV Aegis moved away, leaving the glittering dust of the Armada behind them, a silent monument to the day humanity refused to surrender. The journey home would be long, but for the first time in days, Captain Jay knew they would make it. They will carry the story of this day back to Earth, and the galaxy would never look at the human race the same way again. The silence that filled the bridge of the USV Aegis was not peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet that pressed against the ears of the crew. It was the kind of silence that follows a terrible storm, when the wind stops howling and you realize the damage that has been done. Outside the thick windows, the universe looked the same. The stars were still pinpricks of cold light, and the darkness was still endless. But the space that had been filled with the Xylophian Armada was now transformed. It was no longer empty. It was filled with a vast, glittering cloud of dust. Captain Jay stood motionless at the front of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He stared out at the swirling nebula that had once been an enemy fleet. To the untrained eye, it might have looked beautiful. The dust reflected the light of the distant sun, creating shifting curtains of silver and gray, shimmering like a pearl in the black water. But Jay knew what it really was. It was a graveyard. It was the remains of thousands of living beings, dissolved in an instant. "Is the scan complete?" Jay asked. His voice was low, but it sounded loud in the quiet room. Lieutenant Noah didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his screen, his eyes wide and unblinking. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. He was scanning the debris field, looking for life signs, looking for survivors, looking for anything that would prove this wasn't real. "Noah," Jay said. A little sharper this time. Noah jumped slightly, shaking his head as if to wake himself from a dream. "Yes, Captain, I have the results. It is total, sir. There are no energy signatures. There are no solid objects. The entire formation is just particles. The largest pieces are microscopic." Maina turned her chair away from her station. She looked pale, her dark hair messy from the stress of the last hour. She had built the machine that did this. She knew the science, she knew the math, but seeing the reality was different. "The molecular bonds broke, Captain," she explained softly. The resonance cascade found the frequency of their hulls and their bodies and simply shook them apart. They didn't explode. They unraveled. Jay nodded slowly. He remembered the look on the Xylophian commander's face just before the end. It had been a look of absolute confusion. The alien had expected fire or missiles or a desperate last charge with guns. He had not expected this. He had not expected a weapon that turned his ships into sand. "Captain," a voice came from the communications station. It was David, the young navigator. His voice was trembling. "I am picking up a signal. It's very faint. It's coming from the dust?" Jay walked over to David's station. "Play it." The speakers crackled. The sound that came through was not a voice, and it was not words. It was a high-pitched, chaotic screeching that made everyone on the bridge wince and cover their ears. It sounded like the wind blowing through a broken window, mixed with the scream of a dying animal. "That's the data stream," Mina said quickly, typing at her console. "Their communications network is dissolving, but the automated distress beacons are still trying to transmit. They are broadcasting into the void, but there is no one left to hear them." "Cut the audio," Jay ordered. "I don't want to hear it." The noise stopped and the silence returned. It felt even heavier now. Jay looked at his crew. They were good people. They were explorers and scientists. They had joined the Space Force to discover new worlds, to meet new civilizations, to map the unknown. They were not soldiers. None of them had ever killed anyone before. Today, they had erased an entire fleet. Jay knew that this moment would stay with them for the rest of their lives. It would haunt their dreams. It would change who they were. "Report status of the ship," Jay said, trying to bring their focus back to the present. "Reactor is stable," Mina reported, her voice regaining some of its professional tone. "The resonance cascade overheated the emitters, but they are cooling down now. We used a lot of power, sir. We have enough energy to travel, but not enough to fight again. If there is another fleet hiding, then we run," Jay finished for her. "But there won't be another fleet. The Xylophians are arrogant. They sent the Grand Armada to crush us. They thought we were a joke. They put all their power in one basket to make sure we died. And now that power is dust." Noah looked up from his screen. "Captain, I am detecting a small object. It is not made of dust. It's a data buoy. One of the Xylophian ships must have ejected it before they dissolved. Can we read it?" Kay asked. "It's in their language," Noah said, "but I can try to translate it." A few moments later, text appeared on the main screen. It was a direct transmission from the lead Xylophian ship, sent just seconds before the cascade reached its peak. Asterisk warning. Unknown weapon. Biological and mechanical dissolution in progress. Cannot stop. The humans have used asterisk, the message cut off there. The ship sending it had ceased to exist before it could finish the sentence. Asterisk. The humans have used asterisk J, thought about the unfinished words. A magic spell? A curse? To them, it probably looked like magic. They were a race that relied on lasers and shields, on metal and fire. They did not understand the fundamental forces of the universe the way Mina did. "They called us vermin," Jay said aloud to the bridge. "They said we were primitive. They thought that because we didn't have 1,000 ships, we were weak. They confused technology with power." Mina stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the silver cloud. "My father told me stories," she said quietly. "Stories about the old wars on Earth. He said that humans are at their most dangerous when we are pushed into a corner. We don't give up. We get creative. We change the rules. I think the galaxy is going to learn that lesson," Noah said. He looked at the empty space where the enemy had been. "If we tell Earth Command what happened here, everything changes. We can't keep this a secret. The world needs to know that we can fight back." Jay looked at his tactical officer. "We will tell them, Noah, but we will be careful. We don't want to start a war we can't finish. We just showed the universe that we have teeth. We have to make sure they are afraid of the bite." The ship vibrated slightly as the engines engaged. The dust swirled in the wake of the Aegis, creating beautiful spinning patterns. It looked like snow falling in a globe, trapped and silent. "Set a course for Earth," Jay commanded. "Maximum safe speed. Let's go home." The Aegis turned away from the graveyard. It moved slowly, picking up speed as it left the dust behind. The stars ahead seemed to shine brighter, calling them back. The ship was a small speck of blue in a dark universe, alone again. But it was a speck that had just destroyed an Empire dot. As they traveled, the crew slowly began to relax their shoulders. The terror of the chase was gone. The fear of death had faded, replaced by a strange, solemn pride. They were no longer just explorers. They were the crew that saved humanity from the Xylopheians. They were the ones who refused to surrender. Jay sat back in his chair. He watched the stars streak by. He thought about the future. He thought about the other empires out there, the other races that might look at Earth and see prey. He hoped they would hear about this day. He hoped they would know that humans were not to be underestimated. The sound of the engine changed pitch, a low, steady thrum that vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of survival. It was the sound of humans going home. The silence of the bridge was finally broken by the quiet whispers of the crew, talking to each other, checking systems. Reassuring themselves that they were alive, they had believed the human ship would surrender. Instead, humanity had erased them from the galaxy. The USV Aegis disappeared into the deep dark. Carrying a story that would be told for 1,000 years, the USV Aegis drifted through the darkness, moving faster now as it left the glittering cloud of dust behind. Inside the ship, the mood was shifting. The terror of the chase was gone, replaced by a heavy, thoughtful silence. The crew members moved slowly around the bridge, checking screens and adjusting dials. But their minds were still back in that sector of space, where thousands of ships had turned to sand. Captain Jay sat in his chair, his eyes closed, resting for a moment. He felt the vibration of the engine through the deck plates. It was a feeling he used to ignore, but now it felt like the heartbeat of a living thing. The ship was their protector. It had carried them through the impossible. "Captain," Noah said softly. He didn't want to disturb the quiet, but he had a job to do. "I have finished analyzing the data from the Xylopheian network." Jay opened his eyes and sat up straighter. "What did you find?" "It is strange," Noah said, looking down at his tablet. Even after the main fleet arrived, they were constantly sending updates back to their capital. They were reporting our speed, our shields, our energy levels. They were recording everything. "Of course they were," Jay said. "They wanted to study us before they killed us." "No, it's more than that," Noah insisted. "Look at this log." He put the tablet on Jay's armrest. It showed a stream of alien text, which Noah had translated. Jay read the screen. It was a log entry from the lead Xylopheian ship, written just 10 minutes before they fired the first shot. Subject, humans. Status, surrender imminent, analysis. The human vessel has exhausted its offensive capabilities. Their biological stress levels indicate extreme fear. They are attempting to flee, but they are trapped. D. Commander predicts a 99.9% probability of unconditional surrender within the hour. We will prepare the boarding parties. These humans will make excellent laborers. They are weak, but they have spirit. Jay felt a cold anger in his chest. They weren't just going to kill us, he said, his voice hard. They were going to enslave us. They were already auctioning us off. Mina came over to listen. She looked at the numbers on the screen. They had a probability calculation. They thought we would surrender because they would have surrendered. If they were in our position, with low fuel and no weapons, they would give up. They don't understand us. No, they don't, Jay said. They look at us and see a small, weak ship. They see a species that has only been flying in space for a few hundred years, while they have been flying for thousands. They think time equals power, but they are wrong. He stood up and walked to the window again. The stars were blue-shifted, stretching out as the ship jumped to faster speeds. They believed we would surrender because they have no concept of desperate courage. To them, logic dictates survival at any cost. To a human, sometimes survival means fighting even when logic says you should lose. Mina nodded. When I activated the cascade, I wasn't thinking about the math, she admitted. I was thinking about my little sister. She is on Earth. I was thinking about what the Xylophians would do to her if they found our planet. That is the difference, Jay said. They fight for resources and territory. We fight for home. And we fight dirty when we have to. The ship suddenly gave a sharp lurch, and the alarms blared for a second before cutting out. Report? Jay barked, grabbing the back of Noah's chair. The engine, Noah yelled, typing fast. The jump drive is overheating. The strain of the battle and the extra power we use for the cascade. It's damaging the coils. Can we fix it? I don't know, Noah said, his face pale again. We might have to drop out of FTL soon. If the coils melt, we are stuck in deep space. Drop us out, Jay ordered. Better to be stopped and alive than dead in a warp bubble. The Aegis slowed down. The star lines outside the windows collapsed back into single points. The ship settled into a gentle drift in a quiet sector of space. They were still far from Earth, but they were safe for now. Mena ran a diagnostic scan on the engine. We need to cool the core, she said after a few minutes. It will take at least 4 hours. We can't jump until then. Jay looked at the tactical map. They were in an empty patch of space between two spiral arms of the galaxy. There were no stars nearby, no planets, no trade routes. They were alone. Good, Jay said. Use the time to rest. We have all been awake for 30 hours. The crew nodded gratefully. Noah stood up and stretched, his back popping. Mina rubbed her eyes. They were exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept them going during the fight was fading fast, leaving them feeling heavy and weak. Jay stayed on the bridge while the others took short naps in the crew quarters. He wanted to be alone with his thoughts. He thought about the Xylophians again. He thought about the commander's face when the cascade began to work. The alien hadn't just been afraid of dying. He had been afraid of the unknown. He had faced a weapon he couldn't understand. Humanity was often like that, Jay reflected. We were messy, emotional, and unpredictable. We created art and music that had no logical purpose. We loved people who hurt us, and we fought for causes that seemed hopeless. To a logical race like the Xylophians, we must have looked insane. And that insanity was our greatest weapon. The ship was quiet now, the hum of the cooling system the only sound. Jay looked at the screen that showed the rear view. The dust cloud of the Xylophian fleet was millions of miles behind them now, invisible to the naked eye. But it was still there. He knew that when they got back to Earth, there would be inquiries. The admirals would ask questions about the weapon Mina had built. They would ask why a science ship was equipped with a device capable of erasing matter. They would be scared of it too. Jay wasn't sure how he would answer them. He would tell the truth that they did what they had to do. But he wondered if the galaxy would believe them. He wondered if other races would see humans as a threat now. He wondered if they had just made enemies of everyone, or if they had earned the galaxy's respect. He stood up and walked to the door. He needed coffee. The machine in the mess hall was old and made a terrible buzzing noise, but it made strong coffee. As he walked through the corridors, he saw the ship in a new light. The walls were scratched, the carpet was worn, and the lights flickered occasionally. It was an old ship built by human hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. He entered the mess hall. Mena was there, sitting at a small table with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked like she was staring into a different world. Can't sleep? Jay asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. I keep seeing the dust, Mena said quietly. I keep thinking about those soldiers on the ships. They had families too, probably. They were just following orders. Jay sat down across from her. They came to kill us, Mena. They came to enslave Earth. You saved us. You saved billions of people. I know, she said. But it doesn't make the killing easier. No, it doesn't, Jay agreed. And it shouldn't. If it becomes easy, then we become like them. We become the monsters. The fact that you feel sad is what makes you human? Never lose that. Mina looked at him and gave a small, sad smile. You really think the galaxy will be afraid of us now? Jay took a sip of his hot coffee. I think they will be afraid of what we can do. But fear is not respect. We have to show them that we can be peaceful too. We have to show them that we are explorers, not just conquerors. But we also showed them that we will not be stepped on. The balance, Mina said. The dangerous balance. Exactly, Jay said. We hold the power now. We have to decide how to use it. Just then, the ship's intercom beeped. Noah's voice came through, sounding more alert than before. Captain, please come to the bridge. We are receiving a signal. It's from Earth. Jay and Mina exchanged a look. The mood in the room changed instantly from sad reflection to sharp focus. They stood up and hurried back to the bridge. Noah was sitting at his station, a look of confusion on his face. It's on a tight beam, he explained. Encoded heavily. It was sent hours ago. It just caught up with us. Put it on the main screen, Jay said. The screen flickered. An older man with gray hair and a stern face appeared. It was Admiral Park, the head of the United Space Command. He looked tired. This is a message to all deep space exploration vessels, the Admiral said, his voice grave. We have received reports from the frontier sensors. There has been massive energy spikes in the Orion Arm. We know that many of our ships have gone silent. We fear the worst. The Xylophians have declared war on humanity. They are pushing toward our outer colonies. If you are receiving this, know that you are all that is left. Fight for Earth. Fight for our survival. Jay looked at Mina, then he looked at Noah. They don't know, Noah whispered. They think we are dead. They think they are losing the war already. Jay stepped forward to the microphone. He felt a surge of strength. The galaxy thought humanity was done. The Xylophians were celebrating their victory. The Admiral was preparing for Earth's fall. They were all wrong. Open a channel, Jay commanded. Priority 1, send it directly to the Admiral. Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Jay of the USV Aegis, Jay said, his voice ringing clear and strong across the light years. Admiral Park, I have a report. The Xylophian Armada is gone. We have encountered them. We have engaged them. And they are no longer a threat to the outer colonies. We are coming home. And we are bringing the answer to the war. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the Admiral's voice came back, trembling. Jay, is that really you? What do you mean, they are gone? Jay looked out at the stars. We erased them, sir. We are coming home. The message sent to Earth Command did not reach them instantly. The USV Aegis was still in the deep void, far from the nearest communication relay. However, the act of sending it felt like a turning point for the crew. They had been drifting as ghosts, isolated and forgotten, but now they were rejoining the world. They were no longer just survivors. They were the heralds of a new reality. After hours of tense repairs, the engineering team finally gave the good news. The jump drive was cooled down and patched up. It would not hold together forever, but it was strong enough for one last, long burn. Engine status is green, Mina reported from her station. She looked exhausted, but there was a new energy in her posture. Her hands were steady on the controls. We can jump to the Sol system. Captain Jay stood at the center of the bridge. He straightened his uniform, trying to make himself look presentable for the return. He looked around at his crew. Noah was checking the navigation charts, his face set in concentration. The rest of the officers were at their posts, alert and ready. The fear that had paralyzed them days ago was gone. In its place was a hardened determination. They had seen the face of death and looked away. Lieutenant Noah, Jay said. Set course for Earth. Course locked, Noah replied. Coordinates for the solar system confirmed. Engage the drive, Jay commanded. The stars outside the windows seemed to stretch and bend. The familiar blue-white light of the warp tunnel enveloped the ship. The Aegis vanished from its lonely spot in the darkness, leaping across the light years toward home.